Dr. Alex Rivera had seen many strange things in his 12 years as a government scientist, but nothing had prepared him for what lay before him in the Nevada desert. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, waking him from a deep sleep in his small apartment outside Las Vegas. His supervisor's voice was urgent but careful over the encrypted phone line. "We need you here immediately. Pack for a week. Tell no one where you're going." 2 hours later, Alex found himself in a military helicopter, flying over endless stretches of desert sand. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the landscape in shades of gold and orange. He pressed his face against the window, trying to spot whatever had caused such urgency. Below, he could see a convoy of black vehicles, creating dust clouds as they raced across the desert floor. The helicopter touched down near what looked like a small military camp that had sprung up overnight. Soldiers in desert camouflage moved with purpose between temporary structures and equipment trucks. Alex stepped out into the dry desert air, immediately feeling the heat despite the early hour. Colonel Barnes, a tall man with graying hair and serious eyes, met him at the landing zone. "Dr. Rivera, thank you for coming so quickly. What I'm about to show you must never leave this location. Do you understand?" Alex nodded, though his heart was racing with curiosity. As they walked toward the center of the camp, he noticed something unusual. The soldiers weren't looking outward, as if guarding against external threats. Instead, they were all facing inward, toward something in the middle of the camp. "We detected an unusual energy signature 3 days ago," Colonel Barnes explained. As they walked, our satellites picked up something that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of physics. When we investigated, we found this. He crested a small hill, and Alex stopped walking entirely. His mouth fell open, and he forgot to breathe for several seconds. In the center of a natural crater sat what could only be described as a ship, though unlike any aircraft he had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a school bus, but shaped like a crystal, with smooth surfaces that seemed to bend light around. The entire structure appeared to be made of some kind of translucent material that shifted between silver and blue as the morning light hit it. "It's beautiful," Alex whispered, almost to himself. "Also completely impossible," Colonel Barnes replied. "Our engineers have been studying it for 3 days. The material doesn't match anything in our databases. It's harder than diamond, but somehow flexible, and it's warm to the touch, even though there's no visible power source." As they approached the craft, Alex could see teams of scientists and technicians working around it. They had set up a perimeter of equipment and were taking readings with instruments he recognized and others he didn't. The ship seemed to pulse very gently, like a sleeping heart. "The really interesting part is inside," Colonel Barnes continued. "We found an entry point yesterday. The ship seemed to open for us, like it was waiting." They walked around too. The far side of the craft, where a section of the crystal wall had become transparent, revealing an opening just large enough for a person to step through. Alex could see a soft blue light emanating from within. "Have you been inside?" he asked. "Only briefly. We sent in a small team with full protective equipment. The interior is even more unusual than the exterior. But the real discovery is what we found in the center of the ship." Alex's scientific mind was racing. Everything about this situation defied explanation. The craft showed no signs of impact damage, despite apparently falling from space. The energy readings were unlike anything he had studied. And now they were telling him there was something inside. "Dr. Rivera," Colonel Barnes said, stopping. "Just outside the opening, I need you to prepare yourself for what you're about to see. In 30 years of military service, I've never encountered anything like this." They stepped through the opening, and Alex felt a strange tingling sensation as he crossed the threshold. The interior of the ship was larger than seemed possible. From the outside, the walls curved gracefully upward, meeting in a dome overhead. The blue light came from the walls themselves, which seemed to glow with their own inner energy. The floor was smooth and warm beneath his feet, and he noticed that his footsteps made no sound. The air inside was clean and fresh, with a hint of something that reminded him of rain on summer grass. It was the most peaceful place he had ever been. In the center of the chamber was a raised platform, also made of the same crystal material. And on that platform lay what appeared to be a young woman. Alex's scientific training told him this had to be some kind of advanced technology, perhaps a very sophisticated robot or android. But every instinct he possessed as a human being told him he was looking at a living person. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with features that were almost too perfect to be real. Her skin had a subtle glow, as if lit from within by the same gentle light that filled the ship. Her hair was long and dark, and it seemed to move slightly, as if she were underwater. "We've been monitoring her for 3 days," Colonel Barnes said quietly. "No heartbeat that we can detect, no breathing, no brain activity on our instruments. But she's warm to the touch, and her body shows no signs of damage or decay." Alex approached the platform slowly. The woman was dressed in what looked like a simple white garment that seemed to be made of the same material as the ship. Her eyes were closed, and her face was peaceful, as if she were simply sleeping. "What do you think she is?" Alex asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "That's what we need you to figure out, Doctor. You're our best expert on unknown biological forms. We need to know if she's alive, if she's dangerous, and most importantly, what she wants." Alex stared at the sleeping figure, feeling something he couldn't quite name stirring in his chest. It wasn't just scientific curiosity, though. That was certainly part of it. There was something else, something that made him want to reach out and touch her hand, to somehow let her know that she wasn't alone in this strange place. "I'll need to run tests," he said finally. "Lots of them, and I'll need time to study both her and the ship. They're obviously connected somehow." "You'll have everything you need," Colonel Barnes assured him. "We're setting up a full laboratory here. This location is now classified beyond top secret. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, this place doesn't exist." As they prepared to leave the ship, Alex took one last look at the sleeping woman. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw her eyes move beneath their closed lids, as if she were dreaming. And in that dream, he had the strangest feeling that she was looking back at him. 3 weeks had passed since Alex first stepped into the crystal ship, and he had barely left the makeshift laboratory the military had built around it. His days began before sunrise and ended well after midnight, filled with tests, observations, and questions that seemed to multiply faster than he could answer them. The sleeping woman remained exactly as he had found her, peaceful and still on the crystal platform. Alex had run every test he could think of, and many that he had invented specifically for this situation. Her body temperature matched the ambient temperature of the ship, which seemed to adjust itself to maintain perfect comfort. When the desert sun blazed overhead, both she and the ship remained cool. When the desert nights brought bitter cold, both maintained a gentle warmth. Most puzzling of all, she showed no signs of life by any scientific measure, yet she was clearly not dead. Her skin remained soft and supple. Her hair continued to have that strange underwater quality, and sometimes Alex could swear he saw color shifts in her closed eyelids, as if she were watching dreams play out behind them. "You're getting too attached to the subject," Dr. Peterson warned him one evening as Alex prepared for another late-night observation session. Peterson was the military's psychological expert, brought in to ensure the research team remained objective. "I'm being thorough," Alex replied, not looking up from his instruments. "This is the most important discovery in human history. It deserves thorough study." But Peterson was right, and Alex knew it. He had started talking to her during his long hours of observation, at first just narrating his procedures as he had been trained to do. But gradually, his scientific commentary had become something more personal. He told her about his childhood, about the loneliness of his work, about his dreams of finding proof that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. "The crazy thing is," he would say to her still form, "I always imagined first contact would be different. Radio signals from space, maybe, or a dramatic landing on the White House lawn. I never thought it would be like this, just you and me in this beautiful ship trying to figure each other out." On the 22nd day, everything changed. Alex was conducting his usual morning examination, checking the readings on his instruments and noting any changes from the previous day. The ship's interior lights seemed slightly brighter than usual, and he made a note to investigate whether this correlated with any external factors. He was adjusting a sensor near the platform when he heard something that made his blood freeze. A soft intake of breath, barely audible, but unmistakably real. Alex's head snapped up, and he found himself staring directly into a pair of eyes that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of light. They were open, aware, and focused completely on him with an intensity that made him stumble backward, knocking over a cart of equipment. The woman sat up in one fluid motion, her movements graceful and deliberate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with those remarkable eyes, and Alex felt as if she were seeing not just his face, but somehow looking directly into his thoughts. "You have been calling to me," she said, and her voice was like nothing Alex had ever heard. It had the quality of wind through leaves, of water over stones, of music that existed just at the edge of hearing. Alex's scientific training kicked in, overriding his shock. "You can understand me? You speak English?" A smile crossed her features, and Alex felt his heart do something strange in his chest. "I speak what you need to hear. Language is just another form of energy, like light or sound. I have been listening to your words for many days now." The realization hit him like a physical blow. She had been aware all along, listening to every word he had spoken, every personal detail he had shared during those long, lonely nights of observation. "You heard everything," he said, not quite a question. "I heard a lonely voice calling across the darkness," she replied, sitting up fully. "Now, I heard someone who understood that the universe is vast and full of wonders. Someone who was ready to believe in something beyond the small world he knew." Alex found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "What are you? Where did you come from?" "I am Lyra," she said, and somehow the name seemed to resonate through the ship itself. "I come from a place that exists beside your world, like a reflection in water. My people are explorers, not of space as you understand it, but of consciousness. Itself? Consciousness?" Alex repeated, his scientific mind struggling to process this concept. Lyra nodded, her hair catching the light in ways that seemed to defy physics. "Your scientists think consciousness comes from the brain, but that is like saying music comes from the violin. The instrument is important, but the music exists independently. My people learned long ago to separate our consciousness from our physical forms, to explore realities that exist in the spaces between thoughts." She stood up from the platform, and Alex noticed that her feet seemed to barely touch the crystal floor. "I came to your world because I sensed something calling to me, consciousness that was capable of bridging the gap between worlds. I followed that call, and it led me to you. To me." Alex's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Some of your people are born with the ability to perceive beyond the physical world. You call them psychics, mediums, visionaries. But you are something rarer. You are what we call a bridge, someone whose consciousness can adapt to different planes of existence." Alex felt the walls of his scientific worldview crumbling around him. "That's impossible. I'm just a scientist. I study facts, evidence, measurable phenomena." And yet Lyra said, moving closer, "You have been talking to me for weeks, sensing somehow that I could hear you. You have been drawn to study life beyond your world your entire career. You have always known, somewhere deep inside, that there was something more." As she spoke, Alex realized she was right. His fascination with the possibility of alien life had always been more than professional curiosity. It had been a deep, inexplicable certainty that he was meant to find something, or perhaps that something was meant to find him. "Why now?" he asked. "Why did you come to Earth now?" Lyra's expression grew serious, and for the first time, Alex saw something like worry in her remarkable eyes. "Because my world is dying, and yours may be the only hope for my people to survive. But first, I need to know if you are willing to help me, even if it means changing everything you thought you knew about existence itself." Before Alex could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Through the crystal walls of the ship, he could see soldiers running, their faces tense with urgency. The peaceful bubble of discovery had been shattered, and Alex realized that the real challenge was just beginning. The alarms stopped as suddenly as they had begun, leaving an eerie silence that felt more threatening than the noise itself. Alex could hear boots hitting the ground outside the ship, voices shouting orders, and the unmistakable sound of weapons being readied. His heart pounded as he realized that everything was about to change. "They know you're awake," he whispered to Lyra, who stood perfectly still beside the crystal platform. Her eyes had taken on a silver quality, as if she were listening to something. He couldn't hear. "Yes," she said simply. "They've been watching us this entire time. But Alex, there are things you need to understand before they come for us." Colonel Barnes appeared at the ship's entrance, flanked by 6 armed soldiers. His face was grim, and Alex noticed he was wearing full protective gear, as if Lyra might be dangerous. "Dr. Rivera, step away from the subject immediately," Barnes commanded. "The situation has changed." Alex found himself moving protectively in front of Lyra, surprising himself with his own reaction. "She's not dangerous, Colonel. She's been trying to communicate with us." "That's exactly what makes her dangerous," Barnes replied. "We've been monitoring your conversations, Doctor. This entity has been manipulating you from the beginning. You've become emotionally compromised." Lyra stepped forward, her movements causing the crystal walls of the ship to pulse with a gentle light. "I have manipulated no one," she said, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. "I have simply been honest about who I am and why I came here." The soldiers raised their weapons, but Barnes held up a hand to stop them. "You will submit to immediate containment and testing," he told Lyra. "This facility is now under martial law." "I cannot allow that," Lyra replied. And suddenly Alex felt something extraordinary happen. It was as if a door had opened in his mind, and through it came a flood of images and sensations that took his breath away. He saw Lyra's world, a place where consciousness flowed like water through structures made of crystallized thought. Beings of pure awareness moved through landscapes that shifted based on their emotions and intentions. It was beautiful beyond description, but Alex could also sense something wrong. A darkness spreading through this realm of light. "My dimension is collapsing," Lyra's voice came to him, though he couldn't tell if she was speaking aloud or directly into his mind. "A cosmic event occurs every few million years, causing the barriers between realities to weaken. When this happens, worlds like mine begin to unravel." The vision shifted, and Alex saw other beings like Lyra, thousands of them, their forms flickering as they struggled to maintain existence in a realm that was losing its stability. He felt their desperation, their need to find refuge somewhere. "Safe, Alex, what's happening to you?" Colonel Barnes's voice seemed to come from very far away. Alex realized he was standing perfectly still, his eyes wide and unfocused, completely absorbed in the shared vision. "I'm showing him the truth," Lyra said. "Something your instruments and tests could never reveal." The vision continued. Alex saw Earth from a perspective he had never imagined. Its surface covered in a web of light that represented human consciousness. Most of the light was dim, but scattered across the globe were brighter points. Individuals whose awareness burned more intensely than others. "These are the bridges," Lyra explained. "Humans whose consciousness can adapt to different dimensional frequencies. They are rare, perhaps 1 in 10 million, but they represent hope for both our species." Alex watched in amazement as the vision showed him the potential for connection between the two worlds. He saw a human consciousness expanding, becoming something greater while still remaining fundamentally human. He saw technology that could bridge dimensions, allowing for communication and travel between realities. "But the process requires willing cooperation," Lyra continued. "A bridge must choose to connect with one of my people. The joining creates something new, a hybrid consciousness that can exist in both worlds simultaneously." The vision faded, and Alex found himself back in the ship, surrounded by confused soldiers and a very angry Colonel Barnes. But everything looked different now. He could see the fear in the soldiers' eyes, the way their weapons shook in their hands. He could sense Colonel Barnes's internal struggle between duty and curiosity. "What did you do to him?" Barnes demanded. "I showed him what your scientists never could," Lyra replied. "The true nature of consciousness and the connection between all living things." Alex stepped forward, his mind reeling from what he had experienced. "Colonel, you need to understand. She's not trying to invade or conquer. Her people are refugees looking for a way to survive. Refugees who can manipulate human minds," Barnes shot back. "Do you realize what kind of threat this represents?" "Only threat," Lyra said, her eyes flashing with sudden intensity. comes from those who would try to weaponize what they don't understand. Alex felt another wave of shared consciousness, this one showing him glimpses of what the military was. Planning. He saw laboratories filled with beings like Lyra, saw experiments designed to extract their abilities, saw weapons that could tear holes between dimensions. They already have others, he whispered, the knowledge hitting him like a physical blow. There are more ships, more of your people. Lyra nodded sadly. 7 of my companions have been captured across your world. They are being held in facilities like this one, studied and tested by people who see them only as tools to be used. That's classified information, Barnes snapped. Could you possibly know that? Because we are connected, Lyra explained. What happens to one of us affects all of us. I can feel their pain, their confusion, their fear. And soon, if nothing changes, I will feel them die. Alex felt something breaking inside him, a wall that had always existed between his scientific objectivity and his human emotions. We have to help them, Dr. Rivera, Colonel Barnes said, his voice taking on a warning tone. You are experiencing psychological manipulation. This entity is using advanced technology to influence your thoughts and emotions. No, Alex said, surprised by the strength in his own voice. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly. We're not dealing with technology, Colonel. We're dealing with living beings who need our help. The ship around them began to glow brighter, responding to the emotional intensity in the air. Alex could feel Lyra's presence in his mind, not controlling or manipulating, but simply sharing her reality with him. If we don't act soon, Lyra said, the dimensional barriers will collapse completely. Your world will be flooded with refugees from dying realities, and the chaos will destroy both our species. Or, Barnes said coldly, we can study your abilities and develop defenses against invasion. You still don't understand, Lyra replied. The joining I speak of isn't conquest. It's evolution. A chance for both our species to become something greater than either could be alone. Alex felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could see the fear in the soldier's eyes, the determination in Colonel Barnes's face, and the desperate hope in Lyra's remarkable gaze. Everything that happened next would depend on the choice he made in the next few seconds. Outside the ship, he could hear more vehicles arriving, more soldiers taking positions. Time was running out, and he knew that once the military decided Lyra was a threat, there would be no going back. Alex, Lyra said softly, I need you to trust me. There is something I can show you, something that will help you understand what we could accomplish together. But once you see it, there will be no return to the life you knew before. Looked into her eyes, seeing not just the otherworldly intelligence that resided there, but also something unmistakably kind and gentle. In that moment, Alex Rivera made the decision that would change everything. Alex looked into Lyra's eyes and nodded slowly. Show me. What happened next was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The world around him didn't disappear exactly, but it became translucent, as if he were looking through layers of glass. He could still see the ship, the soldiers, Colonel Barnes with his stern expression. But overlaid on top of this reality was something else entirely. He found himself standing in what appeared to be a vast library. But instead of books, the shelves held glowing orbs of light. Each orb contained what looked like swirling galaxies, and Alex somehow knew that these were memories, experiences, and knowledge from countless civilizations. This is the archive. Lyra's voice came from beside him, though when he turned, she looked different here. Her form was more radiant, less solid, as if she were made of starlight. Every dimensional civilization that has ever existed has contributed to this collection. It is the sum total of consciousness across all realities. Walked toward one of the shelves, drawn by a particularly bright orb. As he approached, images began to flow from it, showing him a world where beings of pure energy had learned to create matter through thought alone. Another orb showed him a civilization that had discovered how to heal any injury by manipulating the basic structure of reality itself. This is incredible, Alex whispered. All of this knowledge, all of these discoveries, will be lost forever if the dimensional collapse continues, Lyra finished. The archive exists in the spaces between realities. When those spaces disappear, so does everything stored here. The scene shifted, and Alex found himself looking at Earth from space. But this Earth was different. Lines of light connected every major city, and he could see streams of energy flowing between them. The planet itself seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat. "This is what your world could become," Lyra explained. "When human consciousness connects with dimensional awareness, your species will take its next evolutionary step. You will keep your humanity, but you will also gain access to knowledge and abilities that will solve your greatest challenges." Alex watched in wonder as the vision showed him diseases being cured with treatments that worked at the quantum level, environmental problems being solved through dimensional technology, and conflicts being resolved through genuine understanding between minds. "But there's a catch, isn't there?" Alex asked, though he already suspected the answer. Lyra's expression grew serious. "The connection must be voluntary on both sides, and once made, it cannot be undone. The human and the dimensional being become something new, something that has never existed before." The vision changed again, and Alex saw himself as he would be after the joining. He was still recognizably human, but there was something more. A depth to his consciousness that extended far beyond his physical form. He could see the connections between all living things, could understand the fundamental forces that held reality together. "You would lose yourself," Lyra said quietly, "but you would also find a larger self that you never knew existed." The shared vision faded, and Alex found himself back in the ship, surrounded by increasingly agitated soldiers. Colonel Barnes was speaking rapidly into a radio, and Alex caught fragments of his conversation. Immediate containment, potential weapon, authorize extreme measures. "Alex," Lyra said urgently, "there is something else you must know. The collapse of the dimensional barriers has already begun. In your world, you call them natural disasters, but they are actually tears in reality itself." She gestured, and the air in front of them shimmered, showing images of recent events around the world. Earthquakes in places that had never seen seismic activity, storms that defied meteorological explanation, and strange phenomena that scientists had been unable to explain. "Every time your military tries to weaponize one of my people, the damage grows worse," Lyra continued. "They are trying to force connections that should be made freely, and each failure tears the fabric of space-time a little more." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "How long do we have?" "If nothing changes, perhaps 6 months before the damage becomes irreversible. But if we can create even a few successful connections, if we can show both our species that cooperation is possible, we might be able to stabilize the barriers." Colonel Barnes finished his radio conversation and turned back to them. "Dr. Rivera, I'm ordering you to step away from the entity immediately. We have new instructions regarding this situation." Alex could see the change in the soldiers' posture, the way their weapons were now aimed directly at Lyra. "What kind of instructions?" "The kind that prioritize the safety of humanity over the wishes of a single compromised scientist," Barnes replied coldly. Lyra moved closer to Alex, and he could feel her presence in his mind, not invasive but comforting, like a warm hand on his shoulder. "They are going to try to separate us," she said, though her lips didn't move. "Once they do, they will attempt to extract my abilities by force. The process will kill me and create a dimensional rupture that could destroy this entire region. We can't let that happen," Alex thought back to her. "There is only one way to prevent it," Lyra replied. "But it requires a choice that will change everything about who you are." Alex understood. The joining she had spoken of, the merging of consciousness, that would create something new. It was the only way to save both species, but it meant giving up his individual existence. "Dr. Rivera," Colonel Barnes said, his voice sharp with authority, "you have 30 seconds to comply with my orders." Alex looked around the ship, at the soldiers with their weapons, at the colonel with his fear disguised as duty, at Lyra with her otherworldly beauty and desperate hope. He thought about his lonely life, his endless search for meaning, his dreams of discovering something greater than himself. "Alex," Lyra said aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the ship, "I need you to know that I am not asking you to sacrifice yourself. I am asking you to become something greater than either of us could be alone." She extended her hand toward him, and Alex could see energy flowing between her fingers like captured lightning. "Together, we can save both our worlds. But apart, we will both die. and our species will follow. The soldiers tensed, and Alex could hear the safety catches on their weapons being released. In moments, they would open fire, and any chance of peaceful resolution would be gone forever. "Time's up, Dr. Rivera," Colonel Barnes said. "Move away from the entity now, or we will assume you have been fully compromised." Alex looked at Lyra's outstretched hand, then at the faces of the soldiers, then back at her incredible eyes. Then he saw not just the hope of her people, but the potential for humanity to become something it had never been before. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him, "if we do this, if we join together, what exactly will we become?" She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, Alex saw something that looked like joy in her. Expression. "We will become the bridge between worlds," she said. "We'll become hope itself." The sound of weapons being raised filled the air, and Alex knew that in the next few seconds, he would have to make the most important decision of his life. Behind him, he could hear Colonel Barnes shouting orders, but the words seemed to come from very far away. All that mattered was the choice: remain human and watch both worlds die, or become something new and give both species a chance at survival. Alex Rivera reached out and took Lyra's hand. The moment Alex's hand touched Lyra's, the world exploded into light. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. Every cell in his body seemed to come alive with electricity, and his consciousness suddenly expanded beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. He could feel Lyra's memories flowing into him like water filling an empty vessel. But instead of drowning his own thoughts, they seemed to blend and merge. Creating something entirely new, he experienced her childhood in the crystal cities of her dimension, felt the joy of floating through landscapes made of pure thought, and understood the deep sadness of watching her world slowly fade away. At the same time, he felt her experiencing his memories, his lonely nights in the laboratory, his dreams of discovering life beyond Earth, his wonder at the beauty of the desert sunrise. The soldiers around them shouted in confusion as the ship began to glow with an intensity that made their protective equipment useless. Colonel Barnes was yelling orders, but his words were lost in the sound of energy crackling through the air.
"Oh, what's happening to them?"
One of the soldiers shouted, his weapon shaking in his hands. Alex could hear the question, but it seemed to come from very far away. He was changing, becoming something that was both himself and Lyra, but also neither of them. His consciousness was expanding, stretching across dimensions, touching the edges of realities he had never known existed. Through their joined awareness, Alex felt the presence of the other captured beings scattered across the globe. He could sense their pain, their fear, and their desperate hope that someone would come to help them. But he could also feel something else, something that filled him with wonder. They weren't alone. Across the Earth, other bridges were awakening. In a laboratory in Russia, a physicist named Dr. Volkov was making contact with another dimensional refugee. In a research facility in Japan, a marine biologist was discovering that the strange creature she had been studying was actually a being of pure consciousness. In underground bases on every continent, the same scene was playing out as humans, with the rare bridge ability, found their destined partners. "Alex, can you hear me?" Colonel Barnes's voice cut through the swirling energy, but when Alex opened his eyes to look at him, he realized that his vision had changed completely. He could see the colonel's fear, not just in his expression, but as a dark cloud surrounding his body, he could see the confusion of the soldiers, their uncertainty about whether to shoot or retreat. But most importantly, he could see the potential in each of them. The possibility for growth and understanding that existed in every human consciousness. "I can hear you, Colonel," Alex said, and his voice had changed too. It carried harmonics that hadn't been there before, undertones of wind and starlight. But I'm not just Alex anymore. Lyra's physical form was beginning to fade, becoming translucent as her consciousness merged more completely with his. But Alex could feel her presence more strongly than ever, as if she had become part of his very soul. "What have you become?" Barnes demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We have become what both our species need to survive," the merged consciousness replied. "We are the bridge between worlds, the connection that will save both dimensions from collapse. The ship around them was changing too, its crystal walls becoming more fluid, more responsive to thought and emotion. Alex realized that he could control it now, could feel its systems as if they were extensions of his own body. The dimensional barriers are stabilizing, he said, though he wasn't sure how he knew this. Information was flowing to him from sources he couldn't identify, knowledge that seemed to exist in the spaces between thoughts. The joining process is spreading across the globe. Other bridges are making the connection. Colonel Barnes raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. I don't care what you think you've accomplished. You're still a threat to humanity. No, Alex said gently, and suddenly he could see the colonel's entire life spread out before him like a map. The childhood trauma that had driven him to seek control, the fear of the unknown that had shaped his military career, the deep loneliness that he hid behind his authority. You're afraid because you don't understand, but I can show you. Before Barnes could react, Alex reached out with his expanded consciousness and gently touched the colonel's mind. It wasn't an invasion or a manipulation, just a sharing of perspective. For a brief moment, Barnes experienced what Alex was experiencing, felt the vast web of consciousness that connected all living things, sensed the incredible potential that existed when fear was replaced with understanding. The colonel staggered backward, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. What did you do to me? I showed you the truth, Alex replied. The same truth that every bridge will share with those who are ready to see it. Around the world, the transformation was accelerating. The merged consciousness could feel each new connection as it formed, each bridge joining with their dimensional partner to create something greater than the sum of their parts. And with each joining, the tears in reality began to heal. The storms that had been ravaging coastlines calmed. Earthquakes and unstable regions suddenly stopped. The strange phenomena that had been baffling scientists around the world began to fade as the dimensional barriers stabilized. The healing has begun, Alex said, turning his attention back to the soldiers and scientists who surrounded the ship. But there is still much work to do. The ship began to rise, lifting slowly from the desert floor. The soldiers scattered, but Alex felt no anger toward them, only compassion for their fear and confusion. Where are you going? Barnes called out, his voice carrying a note of desperate curiosity. To find the others, Alex replied. To free the beings that have been captured, to heal the damage that has been done, and to begin the next phase of evolution for both our species. As the ship climbed higher into the desert sky, Alex felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He was no longer the lonely scientist who had been called to the desert that morning. He was something new, something that had never existed before in any dimension, but most importantly, he was no longer alone. Through his connection with Lyra and the growing network of merged consciousness around the globe, he could feel the presence of others like himself. Bridges who had chosen transformation over fear, evolution over stagnation, hope over despair. What happens now? He asked, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Lyra, to himself, or to the universe itself. Now we build a new world, came the answer, and Alex realized it was all three. A world where consciousness can grow beyond the boundaries of individual existence, where knowledge can be shared across dimensions, where both species can thrive together. The ship disappeared into the morning sky, leaving behind only the memory of light and the promise of transformation. On the ground below, Colonel Barnes stood in the swirling dust, staring up at the empty sky and wondering if what he had witnessed was the end of the world as he knew it, or the beginning of something far more wonderful than he had ever dared to imagine. In research facilities around the globe, other ships were beginning to rise, carrying other merged consciousness toward a future that neither species could have. Achieved alone, the age of separation was ending, and the age of connection had begun. And somewhere in the vast network of joined minds, Alex Rivera smiled with Lyra's joy, knowing that the lonely voice calling across the darkness had finally found its answer.